the book called Beholding, and it's as I think of it, and I'm sort of continuing to learn how to think about it. It's a book length poem. It's a long poem, and it is really kind of studying how we witness makes the world in a certain kind of way. And it takes as its sort of point of departure, the thing that happens through the whole book is that I return to this image, this move from the 1980 NBA Finals, where Dr. J, also known as Julius Erving, who was a basketball player in the 70s and 80s and precedes people like Michael Jordan and LeBron James, et cetera, in terms of like the things that he could kind of do, but the sort of, obviously the imaginative, the sort of ingenuity that makes that particular kind of flight possible. So I'm studying this move throughout the 100 pages of the poem, and I think about the move, and then I disappear on these tangents for a long time, and then I return to this move. So we were laughing a little bit talking before you got on here, and Michael was like, I was like, oh no, it's a basketball poem. I think that's what I heard. And it's really not a basketball poem, though there's basketball in this poem. And I actually love the basketball in this poem. So I'll just read the very first few lines so you can kind of hear where we start. It's Beholding. You might have noticed there's nowhere to go. The wind cutting little eddies at your collarbones and behind your ear. Oh, you know what? I've changed the book since I published it. So I'm going to start again.
Okay.
I wanted to start with a lowercase and A-N-D. And you might have noticed there's nowhere to go. The wind cutting little eddies at your collarbones and behind your ear. As Dr. J drives from the foul line extended to the baseline, defended valiantly by Mark Landsberger, who, in this poem, despite the doofy urge to make him so, is not allegorical, but is rather simply a hard-working journeyman ball player with decent athleticism and size and a floppy mop of dusty blonde hair, got caught up in the gust, sliding his size 16s quick so that Doc, after catching the ball at the elbow and taking one hard dribble toward the baseline, where the dunk would usually commence, could not access the paint, or the lane, or the key, which is what we call the area nearest the goal, which in this case is an iron hole drawn in space, and therefore implies a window, though the key makes it also a door, that Landsberger, it seemed, was trying to keep shut. And so Doc left. He left his feet, which means in basketball, more or less jumping with the ball and with nowhere to go, and which we're warned against by coaches from day one for the ensuing requisite stupid pass, or more simply, though no less stupid, travel, also called walking, which the leaping often leads to. Keep your feet, again and again, which makes the leaping, leaving your feet, sound sacrificial. The way in certain places, certain countries, or countries inside of countries, you must leave by foot with nowhere to go, which there is. I'll stop there, and if you want me to read more, I can read more or read other stuff. Yeah.
No, I love it. I mean, I'll be completely honest with you, Ross. I wasn't really sure about Beholding at first because sports is like this very distant realm to me, already. And I am of that generation who did not know who Dr. J is. So you've schooled me.
Yeah, good. I'm talking to you. Yeah.
So you filled me in a little bit of sports history there.
Yeah.
The part that really got me, or at least the part of the book that sticks out in my mind, is one of the tangents you went on, speaking about your mother pushing you and your brother through the grocery store, and she has to confirm with people they're mine, and then you go into you know, a few details about your relationship with her. I mean, I'm not going to say that that's the most beautiful part of the poem, but it's definitely the one that sticks out in my mind because it is so sincere. Like you
Hmm.
cannot make that up,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah. Yeah. Would it be useful if I read that little part?
If you like, I have it bookmarked here with like a
Yeah.
grocery store receipt. I think it's
Yeah,
page
yeah.
66. Is it 65?
Yeah, yeah, that's right. Yeah, so right. So there's this beautiful image on the cover of the book that I found in the WPA at the Library of Congress, the WPA, farm photos, Farm Bureau photos. And I just was actually I was looking for a photograph of my great grandfather, whose name was Frank Jennings, whose, government name was Frank Jennings, and who, this family story goes that he killed someone and he had to leave, and he changed his name to Henry Jones. And so the Jones is now one of our family names, like we're the Joneses. But if you look at censuses, there's this period, that Frank Jennings goes away and then Henry Jones appears. Anyway, and writing this poem and writing this other book, actually, another book that I'm working on, I just wanted to see what sharecroppers in Arkansas in the 1920s or something looked like, which maybe I wouldn't have been able to find because I think the WPA is after that. But I came across this photograph, this incredibly beautiful photograph of a grandmother and her child, and the child is wearing a Lindy cap. I understand. My friend and teacher Gerald Stern told me it's called a Lindy. It's called a Lindy cap, and Jerry's of the age where he had one of these Lindy caps. Jerry's 95, so he's actually maybe about the age of this boy, actually. Wow. Sort of amazing. And this is the first time I thought of that, sort of moving to me. But anyway, this meditation I have this long meditation on this photograph. One of the digressions from the meditation on the photograph, which is itself a digression from the meditation on the move, the basketball move, is this one where I'm walking. My mother is pushing me and my brother through the supermarket, and I'm sort of comparing my mother to this grandmother in a certain kind of way. The grandmother in the photo has her arms crossed, and I'm sort of imagining that she is like, what are you going to do to my boy? For she knows what they could do more than anyone. She knows what they do more than anyone. And her muscled forearms are fortressed across the diagonal striped pattern of her dress, which toward the knee has 2 holes. And suddenly, like that, her dress becomes a map of the trades, the holes, the bodies of islands cast in the wind-combed sea. And beneath the dress, a short-sleeved lace shirt, the collar of which elegantly droops atop the diagonals. And you will notice as well, on a loop of string circling her neck, a key somehow, not where gravity would pull it, but poised almost perfectly opposite her heart. And just behind her, from the darkness, a child peeking out, looking out into the distance, which might be the distant eye of this camera, which happens also to be now this poem. And though she doesn't touch the boy is hers. My own white mother, how many times told by white people, that brown child is not yours. That curly-headed, sun-loved thing you nursed and whose ass you wiped the shit from and whose very body you bore of your florid gore, at which, for the record, my mother here would say, that's a little much, Rossi. The many knives in her body, in her mouth, my mother did not know were there, sharpening, until in the supermarket, standing in the checkout, some white woman, staring at my white mom, alabaster in a daisy speckled sundress in Painesville, Ohio, My brother riding shotgun in the cart, me on her hip, head tucked into her shoulder, away from the looking, probably making almost a face of disbelief as she turned round and round in her mind the impossibility of this maternal scene. No calculus to accommodate what she's looking at. Her brow furrowed in stupefaction as she cranks us round and round in the petite aperture of her white imagination. And my mother by now rocking the cart back and forth a little faster, my brother dozing from the rocking, all the while holding me on her hip. And seeing the not seeing, Mom opened her blade untenderly to the gawker, trying to fix us by looking up from her TV guide and, in a voice approaching the Luciferian, counseled, "Yes, sir, mine, and I have the stretch marks to prove it." And cut like that the eyes from the woman's head, her reflection disappearing for now with the blade my mother methodically folded and planted into her pocket with the other daisies grinning on her sundress. My mother and her knives make a garden.
Yeah. The many knives in her body. I was like, all right. At that point, I was like, I'm in it.
You're like, all right, Dr. J.
Exactly. But I really do love the way beholding kind of it accumulates, it snowballs, like it's rolling downhill. You just keep going into all these little eddies, I guess, like you said in the book.
Yeah.
Just going from how the players' bodies move to kind of how your body moved through childhood, and then it's all touching on everybody that's connected in this network of your life. But what I was really curious is, seeing as how this poem is based on videos or a video and some photographs, would you call it an ekphrastic poem?
Yeah, I kind of do think it is an ekphrastic poem, and I love that you asked that question, because it's sort of like, it's kind of a weird ekphrastic poem. Like, often we think of like an ekphrastic poem being about a painting or like something sort of specific. But this poem, I mean, it's a kind of maybe a slightly weird ekphrastic poem. I mean, on one hand, it is so much about that 2.5-second clip of Dr. J, doing something, and probably the kind of argument that the book is making, or that I'm making for sure, and that the book is making, is that among the things that little move is an aesthetic endeavor. So partly the book is arguing that, oh yeah, Dr. J is like a poet. This is a feat of the imagination. So one, makes it an ekphrastic poem, but it's also ekphrastic in that. Like it's just reading image after image, or piece of art after piece of art, and I love that. I love like work that sort of is like very explicitly engaging in a kind of explicitly and implicitly engaging in a kind of like discourse or conversation with other pieces of art, one way or another, and in this book, I think it's very explicit that there's these photographs that I'm trying to do very close and lyric readings of, which I think is like, that's the kind of ekphrastic poems I'm interested in, ekphrastic work I'm interested in. It's a kind of criticism, ekphrasis can be like a kind of criticism, and when I say criticism, I mean engagement, so like, someone who writes beautifully about any works, like a book critic or a an art critic or something, who writes really beautifully and kind of illuminates and travels through the work in a certain kind of way. And that, to me, maybe that also constitutes a kind of ekphrastic work, I guess I'm raising the question that I didn't know I had until you asked yours.
No, that is an amazing question. And the fact that you said it's 2.5 seconds basically worth of footage that you're pulling, and stretching into all of this is pretty crazy. And I like what you
Yeah.
said about being a conversation. I mean, throughout the book, you're kind of in conversation with yourself, all of these little parentheses. It's almost like a
Yeah.
commentary that you're following as far as what you personally feel about it, but also what you're seeing and kind of
Yeah.
what any sports fan at the time would have been seeing, which
Hmm.
actually you keep asking the question, what am I seeing?
Yeah.
The repetition of that is really just, I guess you were trying to drive home, what more meaning can you find out of this one little moment
Hmm.
in this
Yeah.
game?
Yeah. Yeah. And the repetition of the what am I looking at? What am I looking at? Also being that question of like, how does what I'm looking at sort of formulate or constitute or imagine or bring the world into being. So if I study this moment of you know this moment of art, for if I study it deeply, what am I making in the world? What does just simply what does my study, what does my witness manifest in the world? There's some way that I've been thinking lately as like witness. uh, Witness is a kind of, I've said that like witness is a kind of making or a kind of world making, and witness itself, how we witness itself as a kind of poetics. Poesis meaning like to make, um, and it's a moving and like truer day by day thing that it seems to me that how we witness is also a kind of poetry. It's a kind of making or making of the world. Yeah.
Oh, excuse me. No, definitely. I was curious. I mean, I know I've heard in other interviews you've done that there are good basketball poems out there. Are there any you could recommend besides yours?
Uh, um, some of the like they're not coming to mind right now.
It's okay if it's not on the top of your
Yeah,
head.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm trying to think if I have like favorite sports poems. I probably do. They're not on the top of my head. I have a favorite basketball book, period. And it's
Yeah.
John Edgar Weideman's, it's called Hoop Roots, John Edgar Weideman. And it's like, it's, it's, it's just incredible. It's just incredible. I mean, it's a book about basketball, um, but it's about basketball in the way that I think of basketball, which is that basketball is one place where people gather and um, in all of this, all of these universes and the cosmos sort of arrive. Um, it's not like the stats, Weidman. I don't know. He's never talking about stats. He's not doing any of that dumb shit. He's talking about like, you know, what 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 does it mean for people to come together and work this out? Basketball courts are these amazing sort of laboratories of social life, and he articulates that and studies that and witnesses that and understands that as well as anyone I've read thus far. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Did you draw any inspiration from that book or from any other poems you've read?
That book is just so deep in me. Like the way that I understand basketball is, I probably read that book when I would imagine I was about 26 or 27. I could have been like 30. I'm 46 now. I bet I was like in my mid to late 20s. And I feel like it so informs the way I think about sport, period. I played football in college, but I'm sort of a serious basketball. Like I coached basketball for a lot of years and played a lot of basketball. It changed my relationship to all these things that I had sort of participated in and witnessed, and it just changed my thinking so deeply that I have to think any time I'm writing about many things, but anytime for sure I'm writing about like basketball, you know, Weidman is totally an inspiration. You know, he's so informed my thought about it, you know.
Good to know. I'll definitely
Yeah,
look it up. Now that you've made me a
yeah.
sports team.
Well, that's the thing. Like sports, the way that like, you know, ESPN sports is just, it's like, I mean, you know, whatever. It's like, it's beautiful. It's like, you know, something, but it's not necessarily interesting. You know, I mean, it might be interesting just to watch people run, you know, and jump and throw a ball in a hoop or something. But it also could really not be interesting. But when you like read Weidman, you see like, oh, this is this is really rich. You know, this is really rich. Like there's all of this history and all of these coalescings of all of these sort of social forces and all of these sort of all of this stuff here, where it might just look like, yeah, watching a game. But sometimes the game is like, oh yeah, this is not a game.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
No, I can definitely agree with that. I mean, I think that's basically what you're doing in beholding anyway, is looking at all of these little pieces that maybe it could go by in a flash. I mean, it's 2 seconds and it's over, but if you really break it down, you're able to see their movements like in an elemental way, and you can watch it so much more closely.
Yeah, yeah. And to think of like if you're, you know, say if you're like a writer or something, you know, like you know what it takes to write, I don't know, like a really good simile, say, or like a really good sentence. Not easy to write. You know, a passable sentence, maybe not that hard, might be hard, but a really good sentence that moves in a way and that like has the syntax doing something necessary and the diction is doing something necessary and it's traveling in a way that sort of somehow relates to the content that it's carrying and yada yada, you know, et cetera, et cetera. Like, man, that's hard to do. Or like a paragraph, or like a, you know, like a essay or something. And you think of like all of the sentences, all of the placing this word here and that word there, this word here and that word there. And then, you know, like I can kind of get that. You know, I'm always talking to students and I'm like, you know, it's really hard. It's really hard to make a good sentence, you know? Like when I write a simile or something, I try like 50 of them, you know? Not always, but sometimes, because it's like practice. You guys use like practice, talking about practice, you know? And when you see a feat like the thing that Dr. J is doing in that moment, it is kind of like, it's like what vision you have to have, and vision that does not come sort of spontaneously out of us, but vision that comes out of all these kinds of practices. Practice being, yes, probably like he jumped and like did amazing layups sometimes, but also practice with like the imagination, you know, like you have to believe that you can fly to fly, you know, you have to practice flying, you know.
That's something to like think about. But I know that in your other poems, it's been called the beautifully mundane. I mean, I know that you have your, you have your, sorry, my computer is being funny. I mean, I think it would be in any of your books, but definitely the catalog of Unabashed Gratitude, where you're really picking up little pieces of life and making them special. Do you find that difficult to do? Or is that just part of your routine now? Just like a mindset that you have?
Yeah, I mean, it's practice. It's a practice, yeah. And it's like, I feel like people will sometimes ask you if I'm sort of like, I think inclined that way. And I think probably I'm not. I think though that I've had like, you know, all kinds of teachers and all kinds of like, yeah, all kinds of models and teachers who have been like, this is how you look very closely at something. you know. And I think of, I mean, I can think of like some of my, Thomas Lux is one of my teachers, and I think of like really beautiful poet who died a few years ago, actually. There are these poems where he kind of is looking so closely at a thing that, you know, might just be, you know, just an experience of like, you know, a kid on a farm in Massachusetts or something. And sort of just with such precision and such detail and such curiosity, sort of wondering and looking at this experience, you know, which may very well have been his own experience. It's astonishing, you know, when you see it. And I know that I've been in the presence of people, physically in the presence of people who have shown me how to do that. Not to mention like all the stuff that I read and all the stuff that I look at and all the stuff that I sort of study and get to absorb. So I feel like that's a long way of saying I definitely, it's not like I don't think I'm necessarily inclined that way. I think I practice it, and I practice it in part, and I feel like I've learned how to practice it in part because it seems like it's like paying attention is like a writerly skill, you know? And I feel like learning how to be a writer, one of the things that I was taught and hung on to is paying close attention is often might be wrong, is how, period, you make interesting poems, you know? Like you gotta look really close, you know, look closer. You know, I teach and I'm always like becoming more and more doubtful of the things that I say and the things that I've said as a teacher. I'm more and more, I'm like, I don't know if I believe that anymore. You know, like, it's bullshit. But there is something that I never lose, like I never leave. And it is this belief in, like not a belief, I mean, maybe it's a belief, the sense that precision itself, like be precise, you know, just be precise and be precise in your language, be precise in your metaphor, be precise in like what you actually are thinking, like trying to, I think probably a kind of precision could lead to a kind of honesty or truth, you know, not always, but I also feel like that's a thing that I can really abide by as a teacher and as a writer. Like there's a kind of precision that you're searching for. That precision can look like any number of things. It could look like a kind of ambiguity, but precise ambiguity is really precise. And you know, and but part of that precision also, I think, just very basically, sometimes comes just by like looking closer at something. You know, looking really close at like a bean flower, you know, like what does that look like? What does that look like? Someone else is just going to be like, it's like a flower. It's like a flower. You know, if they don't even see it, you know, or, you know, dandelions. Like I like to talk about dandelions and because they're really interesting. You know, and it seems like there's a way if we can write, I don't know, like for myself, this is a long answer. Is this okay?
Go for it, yeah.
Okay. It feels like, you know, if we're able to look so closely at whatever, close enough that we understand I've probably never looked closely at anything, which then might foment in us, if that's the word, inspire in us a kind of abiding curiosity. Seems like an abiding curiosity, which is also maybe the opposite of mastery. Seems like that might be good. I mean, I'm interested in that today.
I mean, what I actually wanted to ask you, because I mean, you kind of segued into that beautifully, was how important are plants to you and to your writing?
How important are what?
Plants.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I eat plants every single day. Um,
True.
so they keep me alive, pretty big. Um, um, and like, and I say that, but I also say that as a kind of practice to be like gratitude to the plants for keeping me alive, and gratitude to the trees for shading the house sometimes, and making places for the birds and all the other critters that I don't know to live, and for the roots and for the water and for the million things. Um, I feel like, I mean, maybe in a way, I mean, one of the things that I want to say is that probably having a relationship to plants the way that I do now, like a knowing and active relationship to plants. I mean, and partly implied to that little bracket was that we're having a relationship with plants whether or not we know them because they keep us alive. I think part of my relationship to being a gardener, is like really this this study of or encounter with, or like getting to sort of encounter gratitude, actually, sort of like being in a garden or being in an orchard. You start to learn, I think, or you can start to learn how beholden you actually are to the earth, and like you are never, your will is always really minimal compared to minimal is the wrong word. Your will is just like whatever. You're really in a kind of submission to the earth, or joining with the earth, or something like that. I'm trying to say some kind of word that means the most tender, sweet, like, and something, collaboration, and you know,
Sort of.
what's that?
A communion, maybe.
You're in a communion is a word. Yeah, communion is a good word, right? Like you're really like, thank you. And thank you, because I think I'm a great gardener. One day I might think I'm a great gardener. One day I might think I'm a great gardener, and then like a heavy wind comes and like blows everything off, and it's like, oh, I am at your mercy. That's one of the words too. And so like when you kind of get to, I feel like my relationship to gardening is in part a study, a practice of gratitude. It's a practice of gratitude, because it's like, you can't outsmart anything. Like all the little things that we think, like really achieve and all this shit. It's like, whatever, man. It's like, you're lucky that the floods aren't here right now, or you're lucky that there's not a fire. You're lucky that the earth is giving you your life, and the plants are giving you your fucking food today. But so then if you can, which is a practice, because the I think the standard sort of notion is that no, you can impose your will. You can impose your will on a thing, and all the time. Like that's what exactly. Going to college is about. It's like, just impose your will. Crush today, baby. Crush today. Crush today. Crush today. Wake up and crush today. Wake up. Achieve. Crush today. Don't let anything get in your way. But it's like, well, maybe ask today. Maybe,
wow.
maybe like gratitude to the day, because it doesn't have to be here.
For sure. That's one of the things I was wondering too, is like, I know that you've written so much about gratitude, and positivity, I guess, in a, in an indirect way. Was that the catalyst for your writing, or like a result of it? Do you go into writing a poem saying, I'm gonna do something nice right now, I'm so full of gratitude? Or is it like after you're reading and it kind of like sits on you and you feel all the gratitude for what you just wrote about? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, like with the way I write, I usually have questions, and I have a kind of curiosity about something, you know, and I think I think the way that I generally write is that I have some kind of a question, and it might be a question that comes out of like a story that I kind of want to tell and think about, or an event that I kind of want to think about. Like I think about that fig tree poem in Catalog of Unabashed Gratitude. Kind of a poem is basically just a little poem about a story where I'm walking down Christian Street in Philadelphia, and there's a fig tree, and everyone's kind of gathered around it. I mean, not everyone, but some people are gathered around it, like, oh man, and someone's like sweeping up the figs off the sidewalk, and it's like, whoa, this is all right. And I eat a couple figs, and I grab a couple figs for someone who's not as tall as me, and little older woman walks by and has some, and someone like grabs one on their way to work. And that was just like an event. And then the poem is sort of like, well, what was that event? What was that event? What happened there? It's clearly a poem about, among other things, it's clearly a kind of ode, or a kind of a poem of some kind of gratitude. And no, it's definitely a poem of gratitude, and a poem about our being entangled. Strangers maybe never again is the last line of the poem. And but I didn't know, like I didn't enter that poem being like, this is a poem about gratitude. Really, I was like, what happened there? I want to just write and listen to this. I want to write and listen to the things that I write, see what comes out. And the thing that came out was this sort of fuller meditation on what happened, and why it happened, why the fact that it happened is moving to me in a certain kind of way. Does that make sense as an answer?
It does, definitely.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful way to put it. I think my dog hears your dogs.
I know.
I was in a note that just, going through this book, and I hadn't read one of your poems in maybe a few months, so I went back and read a few, and it's just, what stands out is there's kind of this casual, like relatable, almost just a conversational thing, like almost like you're talking to the characters in your poems, trying to ask them what did happen, what were we seeing when we were together that one and only time. And especially with beholding, it's kind of like in a very Zen way, and like a sort of philosophical way, looking at life but not really putting it on a pedestal. I mean, except for Dr. J, but but just, I just wanted to say that that's what I appreciate the book. That's what I took from it was, and what you were saying about you're kind of beholden to the earth to, you can ask permission, I guess, to see the small things and participate.
Yeah. Like when there's a kind of, I wonder, when you said that, it made me think, if when there's a real sense of being beholden, and even the word beholden in our like sort of common parlance, like you don't want to be beholden to someone. That's our sort of insane, American fucked up world destroying belief system. When in fact we're always beholden. Like we're always beholden. The second, there are, whatever, there are microbes in my stomach at this moment. If they go away, I'm gone like that, and if something funny happens to them, I get sick and maybe I slowly die. It's just, I'm beholden. Thank you, microbes, thank you. There are more of you than there is me. You are me. Thank you, but it's like when I wonder if once you sort of start to practice that beholdenness, then like the little things, there's nothing little anymore. You know, it's funny that even I didn't mean to use the example of the microbes, but it's like I know if I had like a good microscope, I could tell that they were in there, but I can't like see them. You know, I'm like I can't see any microbes, but I know that they're there, and I know that they are. You know, so there is nothing small. You know, there's nothing small. Everything is like you know, thank you too. You know, thank you little like for that little bean flower that like most people will be like, it's a bean flower. It's like man, there's no just. It's a bean flower.
Wow. I was gonna point out, it was in your catalog of unabashed gratitude, and I want to say it was number 64. I'm paraphrasing, but you basically said, "We will die, books will not."
Mm-hmm.
They're the things that
Yeah,
live on after.
but that's in the Book of Delights. Yeah, in the Book of Delights. Yeah, yeah.
I mean, in a weird way, maybe not so weird. It kind of made me think about our current situation, where we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, you know.
Yeah.
We don't know who's going to get hurt in the next, you know, few weeks of all of this chaos that's going on, you know, our political and social situation. But I mean, maybe on a more serious note, do you think that young people, especially young people of color now, have to be more aware of their mortality in these times?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I think there's plenty of things that are making folks more aware of their mortality, like, you know, more conscientious. But I don't know. I don't know. Yeah. But I do think it's like I mean, that being said, the question or when you observe that the end of that essay is like, you know, books don't die and people do. I think in that essay, one of the questions I'm sort of raising is that the fact of our mortality is also in some kind of way the fact of our wonder, you know, and the fact that we are sort of, you know, vessels of or somethings of wonder, you know. We're wonderful, you know what I mean? We're wonderful. We're wonderful. Like, and there is nothing like a kind of, for me anyway, there's nothing like a acute reminder of one's mortality to be like, oh, you're wonderful, you know, we are wonderful, you know, that feels like in a way that feels actually like a practice, you know, like part of the practice of gratitude is actually part of the practice of gratitude, you know, not like, you know, I mean, I don't want to say like, oh, this is the practice of gratitude, but I am saying that gratitude is absolutely connected to understanding mortality. And because if you're never going to die, you know,
why bother?
Then yeah, I mean, it's kind of like, well, if you're never going to die, then okay, maybe you kind of aren't beholden to anything, you know. But the fact is that our precarity is profound. Like our lives are just like these glimmers of precarity in a certain kind of way. It's like, and to sort of engage that in a certain kind of way, in my opinion, which can feel like a sorrow, because it is. Sometimes, you know, like me, to me, it's sad, you know, it's sad. Like, you know, it makes me sad sometimes, you know. In addition to, makes me grateful, you know? Like, it makes me sad to know that everything I love will die. Makes me sad. And from that, makes me grateful, you know, makes me grateful. And there's, to me, like, there's a kind of overlap here with gratitude and joy, you know, like I think when you think of the ways that what I just said, like it's a kind of heartbreak that we walk through the day with, knowing that what we love, all that we love, is you know, fleeting, including ourselves. Like if we if we loved ourselves a little bit, it's like that too is fleeting, you know. Whether we love ourselves or not, that too is fleeting. You know, still, like, your knees are gonna start to hurt, you know, or whatever, you know. It's like, get ready. But that also, it makes you feel gratitude. It makes you feel gratitude for, you know, more gratitude. There was something that you said earlier, and it made me think, you and I may never have a conversation again. Like, you and I may never be in the same room again, this virtual room, you know. And you know, like, that's a practice, I think, to sort of walk on the earth in such a way that you know that this encounter will never happen again. Like, how do I want this encounter to be? Or simply, maybe even more simply, you know, I'm grateful for this encounter, you know, and I'm grateful for it in part because, in a profound part, because I know we're both going to die. You know, it's weird to say, isn't it? But it makes me more grateful.
I love it so much.
It makes me more grateful for it. You know, so I mean, it is kind of like, but anyway, and I also think that, yeah, like I was gonna say, I think that's a little bit like what joy is. You know, joy, you know, it's kind of weird, you know, because like joy can emerge for the feeling of joy, which I think is actually a complicated feeling. I don't think it's not like a bumper sticker feeling, you know. It's like joy might make you weep, might make you fall apart, might make you really fall apart, you know, because I think it is a kind of encounter with this thing, which is not just nice, you know, which is like, you know, it's like the facts of our lives. It's sort of the beautiful, complicated, difficult facts of our lives, you know. It's kind of the ground for gratitude, the ground for joy, or something like that.
Something like that.
Something like
but it's
that.
so simple too. I mean, to put it in so many words you just did, it sounds simple, but
it's simple. It's simple, yeah. It's simple. But I do think it's a practice. Like, it's a practice, and maybe it's an extra practice, again, to know. It feels like an extra practice in a kind of, you know, in a world in which our fundamental connection is constantly being diminished in all these ways, you know. I think that's probably I don't know if it's the purpose, but it's one of the facts of capitalism, you know, which is that to imagine scarcity where there isn't scarcity, you know, and which is, you know, Robin Wall Kimmerer talks about this, like, you know, gratitude is a fucking pain in the ass. He doesn't say it like that. It's a fucking pain in the ass to capitalism, you know, because the first thing that you need to do for capitalism or consumer culture to work is to, like, need shit, you know, to not be good, not be okay, you know. So anyway, and then, but I know we're wrapping up, but to end on the positive, or that was kind of the negative. It's hard in the culture where that's sort of constantly being hammered, you know, what you got to do, what you got, you know. But to practice being like, you know, what is this? This is, how lucky, how, you know, thank you, microbe. Thank you, tree. Thank you, you know, thank you, tree. And then like, thank you, tree. Nah, you're not taking that tree. You're not taking that tree.